And John, I'm just curious, are there particular types of projects that the state is seeking for potential EB5 investment? Is it like manufacturers, or is it housing developments, or can you give us a sense of where the interest lies?
Well, the government, the federal government doesn't put a lot of restrictions on industry or even the percent of the deal that you can finance. A lot of it is driven by the marketplace. So, you know, the marketplace is huge. It's $15 billion in EB5 funds that come in. And we're looking for, I mean, if we can raise, you know, a tiny fraction of that, we will be on a path to success. So we are really looking at, in my opinion, plain vanilla projects, because, you know, we want to get our projects into the stream of EB5 so that we can get things approved and financed rather than doing something exotic. So, you know, interestingly, like a lot of other finance, it takes money to make money. And, you know, when you think about when you go to finance your home, and it's not free, they'll charge you for a credit report, they'll charge you for your appraisal, and it's similar in commercial finance. So if you wanted to raise, say, $10 million, you know, you have to spend a little bit of money to do the due diligence and create all the reports and so forth so you can go forward with your financing. So right from the get-go, if you think it costs maybe $100,000 to raise the funds, does it make sense to do, you know, a raise of $500,000 for a single investor who spent $100,000 to try to get the money? Maybe not. But at a larger scale, it makes much more sense. And as you get into larger scale deals, that initial investment that the developer has to make in order to get that funding, it becomes a smaller fraction of the overall raise. So, you know, I would say that the smallest capital raise in EB5 you might be looking at might be a $10 million raise, or maybe even a $7.5 million raise. So projects that could use that kind of financing. So it's also interesting to note that it's not the whole deal that gets financed. It's just a subordinate position. So if you think about back to the home finance example, let's say if you have a home mortgage, let's say you have a home, you know, you have 20% equity in your home, and you have a first mortgage that's 50% of the value of the home, and then you get maybe a home equity loan. And that home equity loan is in second position to the senior debt holder. So it's the second position that we're looking to finance, or the so-called mezzanine level of finance. So, you know, we're looking at filling in that home equity loan gap for projects that aren't getting off the ground. So that would suggest maybe 30% of the deal. So if we're looking to finance, you know, $10 million, then the actual it might be a $40 million project, something like the one Roland's working on. So, you know, that's about the project size. And in the scheme of things, that's not unrealistic. That's a very reasonable project size. An unreasonable project size for getting out of the door on EB5 would be something in the $200 million range. You know, as our first project. Well, that might be just a little bit, you know, a large lift for, you know, us as the state in our first project. So we're looking for modest projects to get started so that we can establish a track record of success, and then success begets more success. Once we go back to China, looking for more funds, we'll be established. The state of Vermont's established as well. You know, so we'll be recognized also as someone who's established and successful. That's our goal. So what types of projects? You know, there's a lot of interesting, many different interesting projects, but the marketplace traditionally has looked for things that are tangible, they can identify with, like flagged hotel projects. But, you know, the state of Maine is large, and flagged hotel projects not necessarily appropriate for all parts of the state. So there are other types of things. There's housing, there's senior housing. We have a lot of seniors in the state, and the senior housing might be an appropriate type of project to put into the EB5 channel.
Thank you. Excuse me. Janine, talk a little bit about what opportunities the Maine International Trade Center saw in China that prompted the opening of an office there. And if you want to talk more generally about foreign investment and its role in developing Maine's economy, feel free.
Well, I want to thank, of course, Press Herald and you, Carol, because I think what we've pulled together here on the panel has been a great evolution terms of talking about Maine's relationship with China. I go back to the days in the 90s that it wasn't even a blip on the screen when I first started going over there pre my trade center days, and there weren't many Westerners going around. I'm sure that Suzanne can attest to that too. We're some of the few that were actually starting to do business over there. So it's been really exciting to see how Maine's industry has developed in China, and the really ascent in terms of our Maine exports to China. From not even being on the screen, it's now either our second or third, in fact last year, second largest market in the world. And that's starting to also spread out to a lot of different industry sectors. So we were starting to see growth in, the traditional pulp and paper industry, industrial products, seafood started taking off. We knew it was a seafood, high in terms of per capita seafood consumption, particularly when you got on coastal areas, but definitely a lot of interest in our lobster and shrimp and other products. But we've also seen some interesting niche products, aerospace parts, medical parts, things like that, that have started to develop in terms of exports. So we've been working with the Maine companies for a number of years in terms of building up their exports. It's not an easy market to get as your first market entry, and we often say that to people. We like to have people export experience in other markets first, oftentimes before starting to gain entry into China. But that piece in itself, we were watching the expansion. We had multiple trade missions there to develop on the trade side. And oftentimes, there's a direct correlation between trade and foreign direct investment. We also saw a direct correlation between trade and education. And I'm sure Suzanne will talk more about this, but we were starting to see, as the Chinese started opening up more and more and really having the capacity to come over to the U.S., that we saw the visa situation opening up, that we were getting much more Chinese students as well. I think we have about 2,000 international students here in the state, and the majority of them, 800 to 1,000, according to our rough statistics, are Chinese origin. So a lot of interest on the education side. Most of these children that are coming over educated have parents that are involved in major businesses. So we were getting called on quite often. I have, this family coming in. They want to know more about the Maine economy. Can you introduce them to some of our different businesses? And also, by the way, do you have an EB-5? I mean, that's really when we first started getting the questions on EB-5. So we were starting to see more foreign direct investment by the Chinese. I think this year, 2015, is the biggest year the Chinese have ever invested in the United States, a little over $15 billion. Most of that is going to Texas and New York and California. But even in Maine, we've been starting to see some investment. One of our first investments, large-scale investments, was IGIC up in Baileyville with the Woodland Pulp Mill, but also what's really exciting is some of the value-added products that they're starting to come online now with the tissue machines and St. Croix tissue. So we've been developing that relationship and developing out, meeting with China Paper and some other groups, what other opportunities are there, and really what we want to look into is like next generation paper production and things that are really where the future is going on that front. Also with some of the research that we have going on at the university. And then on the EB-5 front, so that was kind of the evolution on FDI. We've also had some investment in PK Floats, which is a company in Lincoln that does float planes. Some investment at Tech Place now from China. So we're seeing more development on what we would say straight business attraction or straight foreign direct investment. So when we actually got an EDA grant about 1.5 years ago and said, come to us with your stretch markets. We know you already have a office for foreign direct investment in Europe, located in London. What are some of the markets you think that there's potential for Maine? And so our first go-to, and that we knew would be probably more of a challenge, was China. We were seeing the growth going on in the U.S. in general. We were seeing more interest going on in terms of investing here in Maine. We were seeing phenomenal growth in terms of our exports, and particularly things like lobster products, industrial machinery, some of what we would say is the base of our economy. And so we basically wrote into the plan of opening a China office in Shanghai. We're in our second year of that now, and we're actually really kind of honing in on Chinese investors it's very different than when we're working with Europeans and some other investors. They really want joint ventures. They really want mergers and acquisitions. They're afraid of the U.S. market in terms of its infrastructure is so different and alien to what they're comfortable with. And so to be able to partner with a company and get entree and get that expertise locally is really attractive to them. So we've actually been working with FAME and DCD and others in terms of, let's start creating a pipeline of projects on just even straight foreign direct investment of companies that are interested in, getting investment from China. They know it's a good fit. Maybe they've been doing some trade there already. They know that that's a market that has good potential growth. And I will add that it was interesting looking over the numbers last night that we just got in our 2015 figures that we actually increased in our export growth by 13% to China last year, whereas the national average was down 6%. So it still has been a good growth market for us. And then came EB5. We were getting questions from the educational institutions. Do we have an EB5? We have parents that are investing in their kids coming here. We love Maine. We want to get real estate in Maine. But, I have this visa and I can only stay so long, and our kids can only stay so long. And then don't have opportunity to maybe work with, which we really need in a state that's aging population. Some of these new populations coming in and are very R&D and STEM and science oriented to be able to stay here and work in some of our companies. And we didn't have that opportunity. So that's what I think spurred LD1 originally. Oftentimes we would send them to Vermont because we have good relationships with Vermont. Keep in mind, they can invest in any EB5 in the US. It doesn't have to be in Maine. But everything in trade and investment is so relationship driven. I think you've heard that with Roland. I think you'll hear that with Suzanne. How do people find out about Maine? Well, it's not because we're so huge, and most of the time people think we're a province of Canada when I'm over talking in China. So it's not like they may know us, for lobsters, but really at the end of the day, 90% of the people I talk to who are quite well traveled don't know anything about Maine. So once they come here and you've got a vested interest, you want to be doing your investment where you have comfort, where you have contacts, where you've spent time. So I'm really excited about this EB5 Regional Center. It's statewide, which is very different than what we had before with the private sector, which was only a couple different projects. It's a huge endeavor. This is going to be a lot of work. John's done a tremendous amount of work already. You've got to have the right partners. You have to vet your agents over there. Also, even people that are, whether they're sending their kids here, whether they're trading here, whether they're investing here as, let's say, a joint venture operation to do something exciting, having that EB5 is just going to allow them to feel confident and comfortable in terms of having a long-term strategic plan, having sustainability for themselves and for their families and for our continued relationship, really, with China.
Great, thank you, Janine. So speaking of relationships, Suzanne, you've had 30 years of experience working with Chinese in a variety of relationships. What is it about the market right now, where Maine is and where China is, that is either a great opportunity for us, or maybe things have changed slightly and the opportunities aren't quite as robust as they once were? How different is it from when you started working in China?
How much time do we have? First of all, I just want to say I'm honored to be on the panel, and I just think that the connection between business, education, culture, tourism, they're all bundled together. So having the business opportunities connected with the education opportunities, it's really important to learn about what everyone else is doing. Also, I just want to point out, Roland, you're talking about how this all came about for you in Lewiston, Auburn, was because the personal connection with the person at Bates who was teaching, who was in Lewiston. And people don't know about Maine. Every time I go to China, I say it's near Boston. It's near Boston. It's 2 hours from Boston. It's Boston lobster.
Yeah.
When I go to anywhere, it's Boston lobster on the menus in Chinese restaurants. It's like, no, it's not. But when they come, they fall in love with what we have. And what we have, the other resource, and what people are interested in, my experience is tourism. Because you've seen, I'm sure, in the papers about the pollution in China. There was an article in the New York Times yesterday, I think. The air in Beijing is brown. Can I just actually see how many people here have been over there, who've been to China? Can you raise your hands?
Wow.
Yeah, it's, you know, one thing that we have that a lot of other places don't have is incredible natural beauty and clean air. And that's something that we totally take for granted. Every day I live in Falmouth and I drive into Portland and I see Mackworth Island and the beauty, and it's like, oh, I'm just driving into work. But when you go over there, there's not a lot of natural beauty in these cities of 20 million people. And it's brown air. And so when I meet with moms about why do you want to send your kid overseas, because I have my own kids and they're far away in college in California and I miss them, but they're in college. And parents are sending their students, their children, younger and younger. It used to be you would go to PhD, to graduate studies, and then it got a little easier to get a visa, so then you'd send your students for university. And now people are coming at the high school level. I get requests for middle school. So we're talking 13 and 14-year-olds with one child policy. The families are putting everything they have into their children. And so sending their kids so far away, when I talk to these moms, why? And some of the first answers they give is because of the air. And the second thing they said to me is because product safety. So these are things that we don't really think about. But I just want to back up a little bit, and I don't want to spend, I want to hear your questions and get into the conversation part, but I definitely am a little bit reflective right now because I just had my 51st birthday 2 weeks ago. And I was 21 when I first went to China, and now I'm 51, and my whole adult life has been trying to make sense of this crazy, complex country. And I'm not there yet. I'm still trying to make sense of it. But as Janine said, in the 90s, and I was there a little bit earlier in the 80s, and when I was there as a student, I went to Bowdoin, and I was the first group of students. They had 4 students who went to the first year they had their study abroad program in Beijing. And it was definitely Dorothy going over the rainbow, showing up in Munchkin Land, and it was still blue and green mouse suits, and there were no cars. The only cars were the Russian-made taxis and official cars, and people were on bikes. The only traffic was bikes, bicycle traffic. And so I remember being in Shanghai recently and standing on the Bund, where behind you is that Pudong. It's a fancy new shiny place that's been developed. And I just had this flashback of when I was there teaching at Fudan University, a summer program. And I took my students across the bridge and I said, see that grassy knoll? That area is going to develop and be a new economic center. And so it's really amazing to me that there was nothing there except grass and a few little buildings and nothing. And now it's this explosive place. It's really, sometimes to me, China just feels like that whack-a-mole at the Cumberland Fair, that game where things pop up and come. I mean, there's so many things going on right now. This conversation can go on for hours and hours and hours, because is it corruption? Is it Xi Jinping and the new crackdown on intellectuals and freedom, and what's going on in Hong Kong and the South China Islands? I mean, there's so much going on in China. There's many days that I say, why am I even doing this? It's not easy, and it's not fun sometimes. There's so many things that are not pretty. And yet also for me, it is, it's not going anywhere. It's so complex and so important that we get along at the governmental level, we get along people to people, and I do think that I had done initially, I worked with businesses on cultural etiquette on how to go before you go to China and workshops and stuff like that, but my home is in education, and for the past 15 years, really, I've been working with schools on how to build a thoughtful program. It's not just rich Chinese students falling from the sky, and suddenly they're here and yay! You know, that means you get more revenue at your school, but you're missing an opportunity to do it really well and thoughtfully, and so there's a lot that happens in doing this well. And I think that the opportunities, particularly in education, because if you've been reading in the news, people want to get their money out. They don't feel safe in China with the corruption, with the UN, the devaluation of the Chinese dollar. It's not so stable, and the wealthy, you know, it's a very small percentage still, but a small percentage is the entire population of the US. You know, if only 270 million people, that's still a lot of people. And then the rising middle class, it definitely, like, sometimes I just have these flashbacks of me riding my bike in the 80s, and then what I do when I go over to China now is I do a lot of school-to-school projects, but I also do a lot of meetings with moms. And I go on my mom tours because it's all personal. They don't know anything about Maine, but they know me, and they like and trust me the same way the whole Auburn program is, because they trusted the person at Bates who had been there. And so I go on these mom tours with moms at the Bible study, the wine group, the book club, and the moms are showing up in Audis and Porsche and beautiful private clubs, and they're listening so intently because they're more sophisticated and they want to really know what's going on. They're recruiting agents that tell them a lot that's not necessarily true, and Maine's near New York. Well, it's not. You need to know that it's where you're coming, and it's just been kind of amazing to see the real concern and care about finding opportunities for their children to have a safety and education. And the education system in China is so, in my mind, so repressive. It's just all memorization. It's all based on one test. And so when kids come here and the school day ends at 2, and then make your own choices, because we focus on the individual so much. And do you want to be in the choir, the jazz band, the track team? And suddenly, Chinese schools end at 9:30 at night. There's no place to make choices. So there's so much of just adjusting to different cultures. So I don't know if I answered your question, Carol, but I'm really excited about, I think, really the education and the culture and the tourism and the business are so integrally connected. And just one other side thing to talk about is that when people go to China, a lot of people go to Beijing, Shanghai, Beijing, Shanghai, Beijing, Shanghai, Hong Kong, Shenzhen, Guangzhou, all along the coast. And they divide China into different tiers. That's tier 1. Those cities are all open. They've been open for a really long time. They're way more sophisticated. There's a lot more. But I focus on tier 2, getting out of those places because they're a little bit more oversaturated, and going, the expression go west, young man, go west, I go west. I've been going to Sichuan province, which is southwestern China, right on the foothills. The next province over is Tibet. And there is so much opportunity going on. So many families are interested in education that it's not oversaturated. And one exciting development, which could be very nice for Portland at least, but maybe for Maine in general, is I was working on a committee to we submitted an application to UNESCO. This is through the mayor's office, through Creative Portland, to become a UNESCO designated food city. Mm-hmm. Under UNESCO, you think Great Wall and the pyramids, but they actually have creative cities. And under the Creative Cities Network is gastronomy. So we submitted an application to UNESCO to become a UN designated food city. But in the application, you needed to get support from an existing designated food city. And Chengdu, the capital of the Sichuan province, is. And through my personal connections with Bob Poole, my friend in the audience over there, who was at the U.S. China Business Council for many years, put me in touch with somebody to get an audience with the vice mayor, who I went in and I felt like I was Nixon and Mao. It was a very, very, very formal, and he's talking and I'm talking, and the interpreters are hidden behind trees, and we talked about developing a relationship, and they have sister cities relationships already with Phoenix, Arizona, and maybe Arizona, maybe San Francisco, and big known cities. They've never heard of Maine, but they've heard of the friend who got me in touch to get to the mayor. And through that, they're interested in developing a sister city relationship between Chengdu and Portland that will be based on food, art, education, tourism as the beginning pieces. So in that, once they come, they've never heard of Maine, they don't know, but once you get on that ferry, go out to Peaks Island, once you go to Acadia, once you eat lobster and see how pretty it is, I think there'll be a lot more business opportunities too. So anyway, that's my
I know if I can just comment. We, to date, have probably hosted about 60 visitors. One plane was pretty much just all visitors come to Auburn, Maine. And everything that you say about the impact that Maine has on folks when they come here for the first time, I would say of those 60 folks, about 40 of them had never been to the United States before, which was surprising to me. And so we put them up in little planes, and we flew them up the Maine coast, and we flew them across the center of the state, and we went over Katahdin and brought them back. And the comment almost universally that came back was, "Wow, you have a lot of trees here." Very few people, lots of trees. The other comment that was, of course, for the folks that came over. Now, this was a group of potential patients, potential investors, people who were interested in tourist options, really, to see the northeastern part of the United States. So there was a different base for why different people came. But universally, there were a number of impressions as exit interviews. I tried to talk to as many folks as possible just to get what their impressions were of me. And their impressions were very clean air, very clean water, wonderful fresh food, access to fresh food. All of the environmental things, very positive, not congested. When the folks went into the hospital in Lewiston for the first time, they could not believe it. Because when you go into a hospital, and I think you had the experience when you were in China, going to the hospital, it's like going into a deli when you take a number. And you might be there for a long time before you actually get seen. They walked into our hospital and they were wondering if people had purposefully moved all the folks out of the hospital, you know, just because they were coming to visit, and how clean the hospital was. And they met with staff, of course, and how professional staff was. But getting used to the regulatory environment of medicine here versus sort of the non-regulatory environment of medicine in China. That also is a big interface that we have to overcome.
Can I just jump in one thing? Just as it's easier to get a student visa, it's also so much easier now to get a tourist visa. And Chinese families and Chinese, they're touring, they're traveling, and they're looking more for adventure travel. You know, I was with my family on a trip to Greenland to see the icebergs, and there was Chinese tourists all there and seeing the icebergs, so I think like people don't know about Maine, but I've been up to, for my birthday, I went on a snowmobile safari up at New England Outdoor Center in Millinocket. You know, that's adventure fun travel. That could be fun and cool if they only knew. And Stephen King is huge in China. So if you have Stephen King themed tours of Maine, why not, right?
We do.
They do? They do?
Escape tour to Bangor.
Oh, okay. That's great.
Does anyone have a question? There's lots of interesting information. I think that's just, my head's a little bit spinning. So I'm wondering, are there any questions from the audience? Yes. Wait, here, there's a microphone, so.
Well, thank you. I'm from New York, so I have a big mouth anyway. My name is Steve Breyer. I'm the executive director of the Little Dolphin School Foundation. We're a 40-year-old nonprofit that specializes in 0 to 5. And we noticed about 15 years ago, we started to get an international community. The children that you saw 20 and 30 years ago, their children are now coming to our school. And because our school is so steeped in literacy, it became a very, very popular place with the medical and scientific community. And my question really is to Suzanne and anyone else who would like to chime in is English taught as a second language now in China to the middle class, to the young children of the middle class? I know it was taught to the upper class, and I was curious because the folks that are coming over with their children now, they speak beautiful English, much better than
your Chinese.
I'm not exactly sure when they started, maybe in middle school, it could even be earlier, but yes, they teach English across the board. The only problem is that their English teacher is often a Chinese person, man or woman, and they're in a class of 60 kids. So they are very good maybe with grammar, but there's no opportunity to actually use it and speak it. So they are teaching English, but there's just so few opportunities, particularly if you're not in Shanghai, Beijing. If you're somewhere else, it's really like when I go into those interior places, I feel like I'm a star because like, hello, I'm wanting to practice because there's not a lot of opportunities.
There's no intent on these children learning English when they come into the school, which of course, at the age of 2 or 3, they learn in 6 weeks, right? You have to kind of tell them, oh, please, keep the native tongue at home so that at least they're bilingual. But thank you very much for your feedback.
I think we had another question over here.
I was just going to add that working with big companies in China, Disney has an English language school system in China. We've never guessed this. It's like pre-care, preschool care, and then early school years. And they're all over these second-tier cities, third-tier cities. They bring in young English speakers from the UK and Ireland. And it's like, for them, it's a share of the wallet. They can't get on TV in China. They can't do other things in China, but they're just trying to get it in every family. And it's a good system and a smart way. The families like it as this middle class grows and can afford it.
Yes, right here.
In a past life, I ran an international consulting group, and there were real concerns about doing business with China in technology, primarily because of at least the perception that the Chinese were lax about intellectual property. And I wonder how much has that changed? It's a concern that goes all the way from high technology patents to selling knockoff Donna Karan scars in the streets of New York, but that were made in China.
So that particular issue was raised at that Westbrook Roundtable, and the fellow from Hong Kong was saying, yes, that's an issue, and businesses do need to be concerned about that. But that's why you have an intermediary. That's why you do a joint venture with an organization that you trust. It's particularly to protect the intellectual property. Other people might want to comment on that?
I've been involved in this issue on a couple of occasions. The project that we're talking, the reason I'm on the panel this morning, prior to that, I was working with a Maine company that was also very interested in importing some Chinese technology in the area of wind electrical generation. And this was a real issue. This was a real issue about patent infringement and some of the things. They had to go over and do a lot of research to make sure that the equipment that they were purchasing was not going to be subject to lawsuits on stealing intellectual property and other things like that. I just happened anecdotally to be friends with a person in Maine who's been an extremely successful inventor and entrepreneur. And they right now are engaged in international intellectual property litigation on a number of products that they have patents that they own, and they're having problems with knockoffs being de-engineered and re-engineered in other places in the world.
Yes, Jill.
Hi, just real quick. I'm Jill Dewson from Portland, and a couple of things brought me here this morning, but I wanted to share a quick story about, in terms of the personal connections. My guy, who's 23 and a Batesy, had the opportunity to travel to China when he graduated from Casco Bay High School. One of the teachers there, it's an expeditionary learning school, had been working with a group of in Taiwan, with Taiwan Outward Bound, to start an expeditionary learning high school in Taiwan. Well, that program invited Casco Bay to send 2 of their graduating seniors over to work with the teaching group over there to give a student perspective on the development of an expeditionary learning school. And it's that connection that led him to come back. Mom, I just felt the music of the language. Anyway, okay, son. But he's been back to China. He has done 2 internships in Taiwan, 2 internships in China with a graduate from Bates who is the CEO of an airplane parts manufacturing company. So anyway, he's back here in Portland working at a company here and retains this interest in China. So my strong interest in coming this morning is in, I'm reaching out to staff at the city. I want to make sure that some of the initiatives that Suzanne talked about, that we stay energized and committed in those initiatives through the transition of our leadership. Our new mayor is equally interested, but someone's got to step up and pick up some of that energy. And I've followed the work at FAME for the EB5 program, and my son will probably follow up with you. So my question is, my assignment this morning was, he sent me, because he's doing a day of service at Preble Street this morning and couldn't come himself. And my assignment is that I need to bring him at least 5 business cards. So that's my question. If some folks would drop a business card on me on their way out, that would be great.
I have kind of a timing question. Suzanne, when do you think you'll hear the answer on whether we get the UNESCO Food City designation?
Yeah, well, we found out in December that we did not. But that doesn't mean that the sister city relationship, that's going to hopefully go forward anyway. And then we're reapplying for next year. Tucson, Arizona got it. And last year, I was just saying, that student that you talked about who's back in Maine, I host the first and third Friday of every month a Chinese language roundtable. And it's for people like me and Bob and Vivica and other people who speak it fluently or not fluently, who just want to, it's fun and formal, and if he wants to just maintain his Mandarin, send him my way.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I'll get your card.
The other Tony question I wanted to ask is, if everything goes according to plan, Roland, when will the medical tourism project actually begin to its pipeline of patients going for care at CMMC?
One of the things that the Chinese investment group has wanted to do is start that now.
Right now?
Right now, even before the facility is under construction or completed. And so we're, of course, going to be finding resources for them for furnished units that can be made available and will be appropriate for the level of care that a person will be receiving. But the project itself, under a construction scenario, once we get to construction, because I didn't talk about the financing and the elements of the financing of this project, but I'll just mention two things. In order to mitigate risk, the company came in saying we have so many tens of millions set aside to undertake a project like this. What kind of a package can we put together? And so we found them a building that was eligible for historic and both federal and state tax credits. So that's significant in Maine because you can double up on the tax credits. And the project site was also available for new market tax credits. So if you take those 3 tiers of tax credits, you can mitigate about 50% of the capital cost, and which is very attractive, of course, to an investor. So getting that financing committed, there's a number of prerequisites to each of those. And the construction itself will take about 18 months. So the construction will be initiated as soon as those elements are all in place, so that their total financing commitment, for those who have worked in historic, you know, there's 3 tiers before you actually can sell and get the revenue out of it. There's 3 steps you have to go through in order to qualify for federal and state credits. A new market is similar. So business plans have to be very similar to a banking portfolio that you would put together when you'd be going to a commercial loan officer. You have to do all of that up front. All of your projections have to be there. They have to be analyzed. They have to make sure they're consistent with the program. And then, as John will be engaged in, then there's a lot more vetting that takes place on EB5, the source. If there's an EB5 investor, the source of that capital has to be clean. As much as you can determine, and which is the vetting process. So those prerequisite steps are in process now, and I think it'd be safe to say in 24 months we'll have a facility built, occupied, and functioning. In the meantime, we will be engaging patients, bringing them over for treatment. They will also, the marketing for this in China is very different than marketing here. If you go on the internet, even if you don't speak the language, if you can go on the internet and just search out, you will see that marketing for medical services is, well, for the attorneys in the office, as you know, when the rules on advertising for legal services changed in the United States, we saw all kinds of different ads. Well, let me put it this way. There never were prohibitions in China for services that you want to put on the internet and advertise. So there's really marketing that goes around all of this in a whole different way than we see marketing for professional medical services here.
And what are the projections? How many patients do they think will come annually? Well,
that's part of the business plan, and I'm very anxious to see what they're going to need as their break-even, because I haven't seen the details of that business plan yet. So to answer that question, we're looking at just slightly under 200,000 square feet in the facility. We're expecting that there will be certain areas that will be rehab areas and other things that will be designated to that, so they won't all be hotel rooms. We're pretty confident because I also sold them the property next door that was the old police station in the city of Auburn. So they own a lot of property along the Minot Avenue corridor. We're working through the state regulations. The public interface will be public infrastructure, so that it can meet all the permitting requirements. I'm working with that with the city and the state, Department of Transportation on that. And so when all of those places are in place, you're going to see the ground broken and they're moving forward.
And are you projecting thousands of people coming, or?
It'll be continuous because there's two potential business models. I don't know which one the investment company will do. They could either do a timeshare,
really,
and resell and resell and resell. You could do a timeshare type of arrangement where you actually have a ownership interest for a short period of time, and then you would plan that for your medical visits. Or they might condominiumize it and sell those all to individual investors. And then investors could have those used in a sort of a timeshare environment when they weren't using them. But I'll know more when I see the final business plan and know how many folks that they're expecting to be able to visit each year.
Okay. And John, what's your best guess on when we find out about Maine's regional EB5 center?
Well, you know, dealing with the federal government and the USCIS on this, projects, individual project submissions and regional center submissions are very opaque. You know, I expect to get a response by fall.
By fall?
Early fall, I hope.
Okay.
Yeah, it usually takes 9 to 13 months to get a regional center approved. We submitted back in December, so I'm very hopeful that we'll be successful by fall.
And once we get that designation, we're ready to roll?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Yeah.
You heard it here first.
Carol, can I do it?
Oh, yes, of course.
One thing I forgot to mention, you were talking about marketing and internet. I have this network of people with Maine ties that live in Beijing and Shanghai and are all connected. When I go over there, we have Maine cocktail parties. And I've talked to all the people in China. Like, okay, I'm doing a panel. What's up? Give me some new trends. And they're talking about e-commerce is so huge right now, and that people are just using their cell phones for everything. People aren't, you know, particularly middle class. They may not have cars. They're not going to stores. But they said that that could be a place for Maine products like, you know, jams and I don't know, but that's huge in China right now is e-commerce, and I don't know a lot about it, but I just wanted to throw that in.
I should say that we actually had, with the trade mission, a huge group that went to Alibaba.
Okay.
And so we actually have quite a bit of Maine seafood, at least, that is on the market with Alibaba and Tmall, and all of these internet sales they've been using them, particularly around lobsters, but are open and interested. We actually also had Kate from Bixby, ours, that was there and meeting with different groups on kind of healthy snacks or healthy candies. So I think there's a lot of food opportunity and a lot, particularly via the internet.
Yeah. Yes, Bob?
Could Janine say a word about what the office or the resource in Shanghai does for people in Maine, what it is?
Sure. That office, as I mentioned, is open under an EDA grant, so it's specifically for foreign direct investment. So what they have very specific numbers that they have to meet in terms of potential investors, getting people to know some of Maine's assets. We have them working on really kind of 3 specific areas in advanced manufacturing and materials, in life science industries, and food industry. So really connecting with groups that have interest in investing, and we actually, as I said, we have a couple of people that are coming in from the Boston Seafood Show who we had connected through them that are interested both in importing but also in investing in processing.
And yes.
I want to ask Roland, there's been a lot of controversy, nothing to do with international, about the creation of concierge class medical facilities as a separate track. And in introducing that into a community with a huge underserved population that doesn't even feel that they have sufficient access to the regular track, are you getting much pushback? And does some of that come back as a kind of anti-Chinese prejudice, typecasting Chinese investment as in this luxury realm?
The answer is yes, but not. It's not a groundswell. It's individualized. But there have been those who have read the horror stories and are sure that that's what their government is bringing to them, if you will, in the world of cynicism that we live in. So we've had some of that, but not a significant amount. I would say that to characterize my community's reaction to this is that this is a fantastic opportunity. And if you look at the Lewiston Auburn Economic Growth Council, the City of Auburn, the City of Lewiston, all of the elected groups have just been 100% in their support of this, to do whatever they can do. Before my retirement, I was working with some potential groups that were looking for foreign investment and wanting to package some deals, to put together some properties that would be available for a direct foreign investment, and we'll be referring those on to John with the establishment of the center. But I think that it's natural for folks to have questions, and especially if someone's experience has been not that rewarding. The delivery of medical services, we haven't had any pushback to say, oh no, it's not going to be available to us, like there's a pie and somebody else is going to take a piece out of it. That's really not been the case. I think it's more so in just questioning motivations and why here, and all the places that they could have done that, why here, there has to be a reason. It's because the governmental officials are inept and they're fools and they're, all of this. And this is really true. There's a group of our population that believes this. One might say that as we track the primaries, there's a significant number. So I can just say my experience has been, my whole career has been in public service, and that was by design. And as I've worked with the state of Maine and leadership, with George and Janine and John and all of the folks that are working so hard to create an economically sustainable and successful model for our state to serve our citizens. When I look at what my city councils have done over the years, as I brought to them these crazy investment ideas, and in times where resources are never plentiful, and subsequently made those hard decisions on the front end, on faith in our city, on faith in our state, and faith in our country, and they've worked out, and we've been very successful. So there's always those that are going to detract. I think anybody that says, oh, ignore them, that's not the right response. I think the right response is, from a cost-benefit standpoint, there's a lot of people in this room, I think, that are involved in business. From a cost-benefit standpoint, you have to look at what opportunities you have on a continuing basis. It's continuously changing. And especially when we look at access to capital markets. As banking, regulatory environments change and other things change in the United States, we really need capital investment. And where is that going to come from? Where the biggest piles of capital are, is the answer.
So on that uplifting note, would you please join me in thanking our panelists this morning?